Welcome back to Holy Girl Talk, your modern Bible podcast created for women who want to grow in faith, deepen their identity in Christ, and walk boldly in their God given purpose. In today's episode, we dive into the extraordinary story of Esther, a woman whose courage, calling, and divine positioning forever altered the destiny of her people. Though Esther lived thousands of years ago, her journey speaks directly into the hearts of women today who are navigating fear, uncertainty, self-doubt, and assignments that feel far bigger than they are. In this episode, we unpack Esther's early life, the hidden layers of her identity, and the unexpected path that elevated her from an orphan girl to the Queen of Persia. We explore the emotional tension she carried between who she was privately and who she was called to be publicly. Esther's life teaches us what it means to walk in courage even when our voice trembles, to trust God's timing when the stakes are high, and to understand that where God places us is never random, it is always intentional, strategic, and connected to our purpose. We also explore the internal conflict Esther wrestled with as she stood between obscurity and obedience, between silence and action. Her story reveals that faith is not passive. It requires discernment, preparation, prayer, fasting, and a willingness to step forward even when we feel unprepared. Esther didn't seek out her assignment found her. And just like so many women today, God equipped her for a calling she did not ask for but was uniquely created to carry. Another powerful theme in this episode is the importance of community. Esther did not rise alone. Mordecai's guidance, wisdom, and covering served as a reminder that God often uses mentors, advisors, and spiritual community to confirm our calling and strengthen our courage. Esther's journey shows that partnership with godly counsel can shape our decisions, expand our clarity, and anchor us when fear tries to take over. Finally, we examine the defining moment where Esther steps fully into her divine purpose and declares, "If I perish, I perish." These iconic words are not rooted in hopelessness, they are rooted in surrender, boldness, and trust. Her bravery teaches us that spiritual courage does not mean the absence of fear, it means moving forward anyway. Esther's obedience shifted generations, proving that one moment of faith-filled decision-making can change everything. This episode is for the woman who feels God calling her to rise, for the woman standing at a crossroads, for the woman battling fear while trying to walk in purpose, for the woman who knows God is nudging her towards something greater but doesn't yet feel qualified. If you need encouragement, clarity, confirmation, or courage for your next step, the story of Esther will meet you exactly where you are. Okay, holy girl, before we talk about Esther's courage, her calling, and her iconic "if I perish" moment, we need to slow down and step into the world she was living in. Because when you understand where Esther came from, you understand just how miraculous her rise truly was. Esther did not grow up wealthy, powerful, educated, or privileged. She wasn't raised in a palace. She wasn't groomed for royalty. She wasn't a girl who had a 5-year plan or a dream board filled with visions of queenship. Esther's story begins in brokenness, an orphan girl being lovingly raised by her older cousin Mordecai after losing both her parents. Her early life was marked with loss, uncertainty, and questions she probably never got answers to. And yet, God was already writing something beautiful behind the scenes. Now imagine this. Esther is a Jewish girl living as a minority in Persia under a king known for impulsive decisions and unpredictable behavior. This was not a stable environment. This was not a safe environment. This was not a place where Esther could fully express who she was. She had to hide her identity. She had to protect her background. She had to blend in to survive. And girl, let's sit with that for a second, because how many of us have lived seasons where we felt like we had to shrink, stay quiet, or hide parts of who we are just to get through the day? Esther's story begins in a world that required silence, caution, and wisdom long before she ever wore a crown. And here's the twist. Esther never chose the palace chose her. She didn't sign up for the role of queen. She was selected because of her beauty, but God chose her because of her purpose. While everyone else saw her as another young woman being swept into a royal competition, heaven saw her as a world changer being positioned with divine precision. What looked random to others was intentional to God. Esther didn't know that every moment of her life, the heartbreak, the obscurity, the silence, the hidden identity, the ordinary days in Mordecai's home, was actually preparation for something she couldn't yet see. Girl, this is where Esther's story becomes incredibly relatable. So many women listening right now feel like their life is ordinary, unpredictable, or stuck in a season that doesn't look anything like purpose. Maybe you're in a job you didn't choose. Maybe you're in a city you didn't plan to be in. Maybe you're navigating family dynamics, financial struggles, or emotional battles you never saw coming. Maybe you feel hidden, unseen, unnoticed, or not yet fully understood. But just like Esther, God is positioning you even when you feel overlooked. You may not feel powerful right now, but God is doing something in the background. You may not feel ready, but God is preparing you. You may not understand the season you're in, but God knows exactly why He placed you there. Before Esther ever saved a nation, she survived seasons that shaped her. Before she ever stepped into purpose, she lived through pain that prepared her. Before she ever spoke boldly, she spent years learning when to be silent. Before she ever stood before a king, she learned how to stand before God. Every detail of her early life mattered. The loss, the mentoring, the hidden identity, the quiet obedience. None of it was wasted. And girl, hear me when I say this. You don't have to start in a palace to be chosen for purpose. You don't have to grow up in the right environment to be called by God. You don't have to have the perfect background to be used for something extraordinary. Esther teaches us that God's favorite place to begin a miracle is usually the place we least expect. The quiet, hidden, ordinary moments where nothing looks divine, but everything is being divinely arranged. This is where her story begins, and your story might be beginning here too. Now, Holy Girl, let's talk about one of the most beautiful, underrated parts of Esther's entire story, the way God positions her. Because before Esther ever acts with courage, before she ever speaks with authority, before she ever steps into her calling, God is already moving her into the exact place she needs to be. And what's so wild is that Esther has no idea any of this is happening. She's not strategizing her rise. She's not campaigning for queenship. She's not plotting or planning or trying to force God's hand. She is simply living, obeying, showing up, and allowing God to open the doors she could never open on her own. Girl, the part that gets me every time is the preparation process. Before Esther could even meet the king, she had to go through 12 months of refinement, 6 months of myrrh oil, 6 months of perfumes and beautifying treatments. But this wasn't about vanity or aesthetics. Spiritually, it symbolizes something deeper. God prepares you long before He presents you. Preparation always comes before purpose. Refinement always comes before revelation. Those quiet seasons where you feel like nothing is changing, that's preparation. Those months where you feel hidden or overlooked, that's preparation. Those routines that feel repetitive or unimportant, that's preparation. Those delays you don't understand, preparation. Those moments where God removes people or shifts opportunities, preparation. Esther wasn't just getting ready for a position, she was being shaped for an assignment. And girl, can we talk about the difference between an opportunity and an assignment? Because this is so important for modern women to understand. Opportunities are things the world gives you. Assignments are things God entrusts to you. Opportunities look glamorous. Assignments look divine. Opportunities elevate your life. Assignments elevate your purpose. Opportunities make sense on paper. Assignments feel spiritually undeniable. Esther didn't just receive an opportunity to become queen, she received an assignment to save a nation. And here's the thing, sometimes God will place you somewhere before your confidence catches up to your calling. Esther didn't walk into the palace thinking, I'm about to change the future of my people. Sis probably walked in thinking, how did I even get here? Am I supposed to be here? Do I fit here? And if we're being honest, that is exactly how so many of us feel in the rooms God places us in. You finally get the job and you feel unqualified. You finally move to the new city and you feel out of place. You start the business and you feel unsure. You start healing and it feels unfamiliar. You step into your purpose and it feels too big for you. That doesn't mean you're in the wrong place. It means God placed you there before you fully saw what He sees in you. And girl, we cannot skip over Mordecai in this section. His role is so essential. Mordecai is that godly voice in your life that says, I see more in you than you see in yourself. He represents divine alignment, the mentors, the counselors, the older women, the spiritual guides God uses to confirm our steps and help us recognize when a moment isn't random but purposeful. Sometimes God speaks through people not to control us, but to direct us, guide us, and remind us who we are becoming. Mordecai helped Esther understand something powerful. You didn't end up here by chance, you were placed here on purpose. And sis, this is the message for you today. You are not where you are by accident. Your job is not an accident. Your relationships are not accidents. Your gifts are not accidents. Your opportunities are not accidents. Your closed doors and open doors are not accidents. Your positioning, even if it feels confusing, is not an accident. God is strategic. God is intentional. God is sovereign. God is always preparing, aligning, shifting, arranging, and positioning you for something that is bigger than what you can currently see. Esther didn't understand her placement at first, but she trusted God in the process. She embraced the preparation. She honored the season she was in. She allowed refinement to shape her character. Because when the moment came for her to rise into her purpose, she was ready, not because she felt ready, but because God had prepared her. And girl, God is doing the same for you. Now, holy girl, this is where Esther's story shifts from quiet preparation to life-altering pressure, and it's the moment her calling finally collides with her fear. Everything is calm on the outside, but beneath the surface, a crisis is brewing. Haman has plotted the destruction of all Jewish people, and Esther suddenly finds herself at the center of a spiritual, emotional, and political storm she never asked for. Up until this point, Esther has been navigating palace life silently and gracefully, hiding her identity, keeping her head down, and simply trying to survive in an environment where one wrong move could mean death. But then Mordecai sends her a message that changes everything. The Jewish people are in danger, and Esther may be the only person with the access, influence, and proximity needed to stop it. And girl, imagine the fear that must have hit her chest in that moment. She knows that approaching the king without being summoned could mean immediate death. She knows revealing her identity could expose her. She knows speaking up could cost her everything. For the first time, Esther is confronted with the reality that her position is not just about comfort, it's about calling. And here's the part that hits so deeply. Esther hesitates. She wrestles. She considers the risk. Because courage doesn't erase fear, it simply refuses to bow to it. Esther's initial response is human and relatable. She essentially says, I can't just go to the king. You know the law. And girl, how many of us have been in that exact emotional space? Called to something bigger but scared of what it might cost? Feeling God nudge you into a new season, a new boundary, a new conversation, a new level, but every insecurity in your body is screaming, I'm not ready? This is where Esther becomes a mirror for every woman listening. This is the moment where her comfort is at war with her purpose. Then Mordecai speaks the words that echo through generations. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this? And holy girl, let those words settle into your spirit. Mordecai isn't pressuring her, he's revealing her purpose. He's saying, Esther, this isn't random. You didn't end up here by accident. You were placed here because God knew a moment like this would come. Suddenly, Esther realizes something crucial. The palace was not her reward, it was her assignment. Her position was never about luxury, it was about purpose. Her comfort was never God's priority. Her calling was. This is where calling and fear collide, and it happens to every woman. At some point in your life, God will place you at an intersection where you must choose between staying silent and stepping up, between hiding and rising, between protecting your comfort and fulfilling your purpose. And girl, that's when you realize calling will always stretch you, challenge you, and pull you into places your confidence hasn't caught up to yet. Esther teaches us that moments of destiny rarely arrive looking easy or convenient. They come disguised as pressure, responsibility, and choices that require faith over fear. She was scared, she was uncertain, she felt unqualified, but calling doesn't wait for confidence, it waits for willingness. Esther's crisis reveals the truth about purpose. It often demands action at the very moment you feel least prepared. It invites you into rooms that intimidate you. It asks you to speak when staying quiet feels safer. It pushes you into growth when comfort feels easier. And it reminds you that God never positions you without equipping you. Esther's fear was real, but so was her assignment. And this tension between the two is exactly what births her courage in the next part of her story. Holy girl, this is the moment where Esther shifts from fearful to faithful, from hesitant to obedient, from hidden to divinely activated. After wrestling with her fear and facing the truth of her calling, Esther does something unbelievably brave. She decides to step forward, even though everything in her circumstances is screaming that it's dangerous. Instead of acting impulsively, she turns first to God, calling for 3 days of fasting and prayer for herself, her maids, and all the Jews in the region. And girl, that right there is a spiritual blueprint. Before Esther moves, she kneels. Before she speaks, she seeks. Before she takes action, she aligns herself with heaven's strategy. She understands that real courage isn't loud or flashy. It's rooted in surrender, wisdom, and spiritual preparation. After those 3 days, she rises with a strength that didn't come from her personality or her confidence, but from the presence of God Himself. This is where she declares those iconic words, "If I perish," which are so often misunderstood as hopelessness. But holy girl, those words are actually a faith declaration. They mean, I am choosing obedience over fear. I am choosing purpose over safety. I am choosing God's will over my own comfort. And whatever happens is in His hands. That is not despair, that is courage at its highest spiritual form. What's so powerful about this moment is that Esther doesn't march into the king's presence loudly or dramatically. She enters with quiet strength, clothed in wisdom, and guided by a strategy that the Holy Spirit whispered into her spirit. She doesn't expose Haman right away. She doesn't rush. She doesn't panic. She invites the king to a banquet, then another, demonstrating patience, timing, and discernment. Courage isn't always immediate action. Sometimes courage is strategic obedience. Esther shows us that bravery isn't always a roar. Sometimes it's the calm, steady voice that says, I will do what God is asking of me, even if my hands are trembling. And girl, that kind of courage changes things. It shifts atmospheres. It opens doors that fear tries to close. It positions you for favor in places where you expect rejection. When the king extends his golden scepter toward Esther, granting her access instead of punishment, it becomes a physical demonstration of how God responds when His daughters step into purpose. He covers them, protects them, and paves the way. Esther teaches us that courage doesn't eliminate fear, it simply refuses to let fear lead. Courage is choosing obedience when you can't predict the outcome. Courage is trusting that God's instruction is wiser than your comfort zone. Courage is recognizing that your purpose is worth the risk. And for every woman listening who feels like God is calling her into something bigger, something scary, something stretching, something that threatens to expose the parts of you you've been hiding, Esther is your reminder that God never asks you to step into something He hasn't already prepared you to handle. Her courage wasn't born in the throne room, it was born in fasting, prayer, stillness, and surrender. And girl, the same courage that lived in Esther can live in you too. Holy girl, this is the part of Esther's story that gives me chills every single time because this is where we see what happens when a woman chooses obedience, even when the outcome is uncertain. After 3 days of fasting, praying, and aligning herself completely with God's will, Esther steps into the palace court, knowing full well that walking in uninvited could mean immediate death. But what she doesn't see with her physical eyes, what she cannot possibly imagine, is the way heaven is already moving on her behalf. The king, who had a history of impulsive decisions and unpredictable moods, looks up and sees Esther standing there in quiet confidence, and something shifts. Instead of reacting with anger or punishment, he extends his golden scepter toward her, a sign of favor, protection, and divine mercy. That one gesture is physical proof that when you step into purpose, God has already stepped into the room before you. And girl, this is why obedience matters, because God prepares hearts you're about to speak to, softens environments you're about to enter, and arranges outcomes you could never produce on your own. Esther hadn't said a single word yet, but favor was already flowing. What's so striking about this breakthrough is that Esther doesn't rush into her request. She doesn't immediately expose Haman or cry out in panic. Instead, she moves with strategy, patience, and wisdom that could only come from God. She invites the king and Haman to a banquet, not once but twice, showing us that divine timing is just as important as divine courage. Sometimes God gives you the assignment, but He also gives you the pace at which to walk in it. Esther could have let emotion drive her, but instead she let the Spirit guide her. And girl, that is such a powerful lesson. Breakthrough isn't just about boldness, it's about alignment. It's about hearing God say, wait. When your fear says hurry, it's about trusting that God will create the perfect moment to reveal the truth. When Esther finally speaks up at the second banquet, she does so with clarity, precision, and confidence. She reveals her identity, exposes Haman's plot, and advocates for her people with a grace that only someone spiritually grounded could carry. And the king is stunned, not at her courage alone, but at the realization that his own trusted advisor was trying to destroy the queen's people. That revelation shifts everything. What happens next is nothing short of a divine reversal. Haman, who built gallows to destroy Mordecai, is executed on the very structure he created. The decree meant to annihilate the Jewish people is overturned. Mordecai is elevated to a position of authority, and Esther is honored, protected, and empowered in ways she never could have imagined when she first stepped into the palace. This is what happens when God steps into a story. He doesn't just fix things, he reverses them. He doesn't just defend you, he elevates you. He doesn't just close the enemy's plan, he builds a future from the ruins. God takes what was meant to harm and transforms it into a testimony that future generations will talk about. Esther's obedience didn't just save her life, it saved an entire nation. It preserved the lineage through which Jesus would eventually come. One woman's obedience created a ripple effect that changed the course of history. And girl, this is where it gets personal for us as modern women. Sometimes you don't realize how big your obedience is. You don't realize that the conversation you've been avoiding, the decision you're afraid to make, the healing journey you keep postponing, the boundary you need to set, or the step of faith God keeps nudging you toward may not just be about you. It may be connected to the lives of people around you. It may shape the environment your future children will grow up in. It may shift generational patterns. It may close the door on spiritual attacks that have followed your family for decades. You think it's just one decision, but heaven sees a legacy. Esther didn't know the weight of her yes when she gave it. She didn't know she was stepping into world-changing history. She didn't know that generations would call her courageous. She simply obeyed. She simply trusted. She simply followed the leading of God, even though her stomach was tight with fear. Breakthrough often looks small on the surface, but monumental in the spiritual realm. When Esther walked toward the king, she probably looked like a single woman taking a risky step. But spiritually, she was a warrior walking into destiny. When she fasted, it looked like sacrifice, but in the spirit, she was opening supernatural doors. When she spoke, it looked like a conversation, but in the spirit, chains were breaking. And girl, that is true for you too. Your obedience may look simple, quiet, or private, but its impact is loud, powerful, and generational in heaven's eyes. Esther's breakthrough reminds us that God honors obedience with favor, with protection, with strategy, with elevation, and with divine reversal. He takes the risk you're afraid of and turns it into the testimony you'll one day celebrate. He takes the moment you think will break you and transforms it into the moment that births your purpose. Esther walked into her calling trembling, but she walked out triumphant. And holy girl, the same God who honored Esther's obedience is the same God writing your story today. Holy girl, as we close Esther's story, this is where everything comes full circle. Because Esther is not just a historical figure, she is a blueprint for every woman who has ever questioned her worth, her voice, her timing, her calling, or her ability to rise when God asks her to. Esther teaches us that you don't have to come from a perfect background to be chosen. You don't have to feel qualified to be called, and you don't have to be fearless to be courageous. You just have to be willing. Her life shows us that God often chooses ordinary, hidden, underestimated women to carry out extraordinary assignments. She reminds us that purpose doesn't always look glamorous. It often looks like responsibility, obedience, and decisions that require us to grow beyond who we used to be. Esther teaches us that before God positions you publicly, he prepares you privately. She teaches us that hidden seasons are not punishment, they are preparation. She teaches us that God will often place you in environments that stretch your identity, challenge your comfort, and reveal strengths you didn't know you had. And girl, she teaches you that your silence may feel safe, but your purpose requires your voice. Esther also teaches us that courage does not mean the absence of fear. Courage means choosing obedience even while fear whispers in your ear. It means stepping into a room where you don't know the outcome. It means trusting God with your reputation, your timing, your relationships, your opportunities, and your future. Esther could not predict how the king would respond, yet she stepped forward anyway because she knew who was standing behind her. And sis, that is the heart of spiritual courage, trusting the God who called you more than the fear that tries to contain you. Esther's story also reminds us that obedience is never just about us. Her yes protected generations. Her courage shifted history. Her faith preserved the lineage of Jesus. And girl, the same is possible in your life. Your obedience may shift the atmosphere of your home. Your courage may break generational cycles. Your boundaries may create healthier futures for the women who come after you. Your healing may repair family patterns that once felt unbreakable. Your willingness to rise may open doors for people connected to your assignment. You are not just living your story, you are shaping stories that will outlive you. Another powerful lesson Esther gives us is the value of godly counsel. Mordecai wasn't just a guardian, he was a spiritual mentor, a voice of wisdom, accountability, and clarity. He helped her discern the moment. He helped her understand that her placement had purpose. God often uses wise, grounded people to help us see what we can't yet recognize in ourselves. Esther teaches us to honor those voices, to seek counsel, to remain humble, and to stay connected to people who push us toward purpose rather than comfort. And finally, Esther teaches us that when God calls you, he equips you. When God positions you, he prepares you. When God opens a door, he provides protection. When God gives an assignment, he supplies the strength. You don't walk into purpose alone, you walk with divine backing. Esther's crown did not make her powerful, her obedience did. And holy girl, the same power is available to you. God is calling you to rise, to speak, to trust, to surrender, to believe that you were made for such a time as this. Your life has purpose, your voice has weight, your presence is intentional, and your courage, just like Esther's, can change everything. Holy girl, thank you for spending this time with me today as we stepped into the life of Esther, a woman who reminds us that God can take an ordinary girl hidden in the background and position her for extraordinary purpose. I pray her courage stirred something in you. I pray her obedience encouraged you. I pray her story reminded you that even when you feel unsure, unseen, or unqualified, God is still weaving something intentional into your life. Esther didn't know she was walking into destiny. She was just walking in obedience. And sometimes that's all God needs. One woman who is willing to say yes even when the outcome feels uncertain. So as you close this episode, I want you to carry this truth in your heart. You were created for such a time as this, not by accident, not by coincidence, not by random chance, but by divine design. God placed you exactly where you are with the people you're connected to in the season you're living through because there is something he wants to do through you. You don't need to rush the process. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to feel brave every moment of the day. You just need to stay surrendered, stay prayerful, stay available, and stay aligned. God will give you the courage when you need it. God will provide the strategy when the moment comes. God will prepare the room before you enter it. And God will honor your obedience in ways you can't even imagine yet. If this episode spoke to you, encouraged you, or reminded you of your worth and your calling, I want you to hold on to that feeling. Don't let it fade as soon as you hit pause. Let it shape your decisions. Let it guide your conversations. Let it give you the courage to step into whatever God has been nudging you toward. And remember, you are not alone in this journey. We are a community of women learning, growing, healing, and rising together. Before we go, I want you to know that I'm praying for you, praying for your clarity, your strength, your boldness, your healing, and your purpose. If you ever need prayer, if you ever want to share your testimony, or if you have an idea for a future episode, you can email me at holygirltalkpodcast@gmail.com. I love hearing from you, and if this episode blessed you, don't forget to share it with another woman who might need this reminder today. Thank you so much for listening to Holy Girl Talk. Keep walking in purpose, keep trusting God's timing, and keep believing that the story he is writing for your life is more beautiful than anything you could ever imagine. I'll see you in the next episode, Holy Girl. Stay encouraged, stay aligned, and stay covered.